Hello, protocols, packets, and programs. Welcome to October, when tales of terror become timely and the days take a fearful turn towards Halloween. AppSec has many monsters to fear. Familiar ones, like anything written in C, and unfamiliar ones in the unknown, like whatever it is password strength calculators are supposedly doing, whatever item 11 was that didn't make a top 10 list, or why phishing needs more than one term. Because sometimes the unknown is more familiar than we realize, because sometimes AppSec is the monster. Which means this week we chat with Simon Bennetts and Ori Bendet about Zed Attack Proxy, its new relationship, and why it's not scared about the future. Stay brave and stay tuned for Application Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show to learn the latest tools and techniques to understand DevOps, applications, and the cloud. Your trusted source for the latest AppSec news. It's time for Application Security Weekly. In 2024, the future of identity, security, and digital transformation converges at Octane, hosted by Okta. On October 15th through 17th, join the brightest minds in tech and business in Las Vegas or online as they explore groundbreaking innovations and unveil the latest Okta solutions to keep your organization secure, connected, and ahead of the curve. Whether you're a developer, an IT or security leader, or a visionary, Octane is your gateway to transforming tomorrow, today. Security Weekly listeners only need to pay $100 for your full conference pass for Octane by using the discount code OKTNSC24 at securityweekly.com/Octane2024 and can stream the event live on okta.com/Octane. That's OKTANE. This is episode 302, recorded October 7th, 2024. I'm your host, Mike Shima. I'm here with John Kinsella. Hello, Mr. Kinsella.
Mike, it's good to be back. I'm extremely bummed I missed episode 300, but good to see you and happy to be here.
Good to see you. Happy to have you here. And we hopefully will have another 300 or so episodes to go and have you around for all of them. For this episode, we have with us Ori Bendet, who brings more than 18 years of experience to his role as VP of Product Management at Checkmarx. Prior to Checkmarx, he held leadership and engineering positions at Time to Know, HPE, PickApp, and Bazek. Hello, Ori.
Hey, Mike. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Happy to have you here. And also having here Simon Bennetts, who is familiar to the show and is the Zed Attack Proxy founder and project leader. He's brought Zap to conferences all over the world, including Black Hat, Java 1, FOSDEM, and OWASP. Prior to making the move into security, he was, cue the scary peal of thunder, a developer for 25 years. Exactly. Hello, Simon. Perfect introduction for yourself. Well done.
Thank you very much, Mike. It's a pleasure to be back.
It's a pleasure to have you back. And as listeners hopefully know when they listen to the prior episodes, we had a lot of questions and conversations with you about the history, the funding, the future of Zed Attack Proxy, because it's an open source tool. It's a venerable open source tool, and it's one that is still used by companies, communities, individuals alike, but was struggling. And now we're at the point where I think you and your compatriots on Zap are struggling less, I will say. Tell us a bit more about about what's happened over the last month.
Well, that's certainly the case, and as we talked before, we've struggled with funding Zap, and it's my fault, really. You need a business model. Unfortunately, open source projects are fine when they're tiny little things you can do in your spare time. But once they get a bit bigger than that, then you need to work out how to pay for them. And that's hard, and that's not what I'm very good at, I'm afraid. So we tried a whole load of things and struggled and failed a lot of things, and things were not looking good at all. But then we got talking to Ori, and he made a proposal which seemed which works very well for both Checkmarx and for Zap, I'm delighted to say.
And one of the things we have a link to the announcement in the show notes as well. And it's now, if I'm going to say the phrase correctly, Zap powered by Checkmarx. Zap hasn't disappeared, right? We actually have Simon here in person. This is not, he's not in a secure location. And Ori, give us a little bit of Checkmarx perspective. What was, stepping in, bringing in this open source tool, but what it looks like still fostering in a way that's fostering that open source community behind it.
Yes, absolutely. So Checkmarx has utilized Zap over the last 2 years or so as the underlying engine of our DAS commercial offering. And as we matured with the offering, we came to the point that we probably need more from the engine. And then this is what started kind of the discussion and the relationship with Simon and got us to the point that now the Zap core team is part of Checkmarx. As we announced, Simon and Rick and Ricardo joined us as full-time employees, doing what they love most, which is to develop Zap for the great engine, solution, open source scanner that it is. And it's kind of a win-win. And for us, it was kind of a no-brainer because Simon was looking, as he just said, in getting or finding creative ways on how to work full-time on Zap. And as Checkmarx, we were able to do that by having them join Checkmarx. And now, we are happy because we have the knowledge and the engineers. Simon and the team is happy because they finally get to do what they love most, which is to develop Zap.
Yes, and Simon, just so you know, I'm going to ask in a couple of minutes if you've actually been able to write some code recently rather than trying to wrangle funding. But before we get to that, keep everyone in suspense. One of the things we talked about last time was that you, as Zap, companies are using it, and that's a wonderful thing. But one of the challenges, as someone who's fostering, trying to build features, trying to address what the community needs, what companies need, they might say, well, this didn't work. And when something doesn't work, it's always helpful to debug, have information available to you. But you were saying that was really hard. The conversation almost stopped there. So how does that change now for you? And what's the benefit here?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in many cases, companies don't even tell us that they're using Zap. I kind of hear second or third hand sometimes, and obviously sometimes not at all. I found that Zap is running in a lot of the biggest tech companies in the world, internally. And, sometimes people do report problems, but often they report just something's gone wrong, but we can't tell you very much about it. Getting detail, if you don't have that commercial relationship with a company, in some cases they just can't tell you. They have internal policies or whatever, good reasons why they can't share the details we need. And that is really difficult. Whereas with Checkmarx have got a lot of customers and, they have very definite requirements. And when they start having problems with Zap, well, they can share everything with us. So we get that means we can work a lot more closely with a lot more people than we've been able to. And that will help everyone because, the problems that Checkmarx customers will be having with Zap, other people will be having as well. So, we get to work closely with them, help them with their problems, and that just makes Zap better.
And then, Ori, from your perspective, how do you see that difference with having this direct communication now with Simon and team, making a difference? Because, and I do want to throw in here too, it's the month of October and things are scary and worried. It can be the community worried about, Zap is being taken over. That's one worrisome framing here. How would you approach this to make sure that the community can be comforted to a degree about this relationship?
So I think, and Simon, keep me honest here, it was one of the first things that me and Simon discussed where I straight out told him, Simon, my goal is not to have a vendor takedown of Zap. That's not why I want you and the team to join. We look at community as a point of strength because community allows us to drive innovation and get feedback much faster. And we've done that with other open source a project that Checkmarx has, Geeks, Too Many Secrets. We have a few others. And by the way, to Simon's previous point, we do have to this day commercial tools built on the open source tools that Checkmarx provide, and we look at it as a great kind of point that we can say, yes, this vendor is using that, and that doesn't we don't have any problem with that. But to the point is, we wanted Zap because we believe in the power of the community. We believe that Zap, which is now part of Checkmarx, but back then Zap had the goal of improving it and providing a better solution for the community. Checkmarx wanted to provide a better solution for their customers, and luckily for both sides, it's now kind of overlap and we see side by side. So by improving Zap, the open source, it will improve the commercial offering of Checkmarx, and we completely intend and are being very honest and open about it to keep Zap open source to the community, by the community, and not change anything regarding the license or anything like that.
So lots of new features, helping customers, helping community. It does bring me back to that question I promised, Simon. You've been writing this summer lots of emails and funding requests. How's that Java code going now?
Hey, I'm back into it. Yes, I have managed to write some code. I've submitted some pull requests. They've been merged. It feels good. I've spent way too long on video calls and emails and email threads and trying to convince companies who use Zap heavily that maybe they should support it in some way, shape or form, which is, not one of my strengths, I'm afraid, not something I'm very good at. So it's really good to get back to coding.
Well, now that you are back to coding, and if one of your strengths wasn't reaching out for funding, asking for money was what it boils down to, perhaps you could have replaced yourself with a chatbot, a Gen AI, and asked it to, for some prompts for help. But you could have also been testing that chat AI as well. So one of your peers has been working on some new and interesting things about that Zap can handle right now. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so, we've been having loads of questions over the last year or so about what we're doing with LLMs. How are you going to integrate LLMs with Zap? And it's one of these questions which is, there's never a simple answer. I'm generally skeptical about LLMs. I think they're very, very good at certain things. They're not so good at other things. So they're not good at technical detail. So using LLMs to attack applications, I don't think that's going to be particularly effective in many cases. But we've now got some new Zap fuzzing payloads for attacking LLMs. So using Zap to attack LLMs, that's different. That's something we're definitely playing around with. So a guy called Yanis, who was actually one of the guys who did the initial pen test, which caused me to have to create Zap. He's been working on those. So we're looking at attacking LLMs. And the other problem with LLMs is to actually get useful information out, you need a lot of really good data. And open source projects like Zap don't have lots of really good data. We have a certain amount of telemetry, but that's all, none of that has any details. We don't know anything about any of our customers or any of the applications. So we don't have that data. A company like Checkmarx, on the other hand, does have a lot of good data. So there's other possibilities there. So there's lots of things we can do now. And being part of a much larger organization with a lot more resources suddenly opens doors for us.
And it absolutely sounds like Zap, if we say prompt injection, Zap sounds fit for purpose to just extend those fuzzing comments, all the mutations it's been doing for cross-site scripting, SQL injection, etc., into that prompt injection.
Exactly. And LLMs are just bizarre because there's no real separation from the commands from the data. This is crazy. This is exactly what we've been telling people not to do for years. Anyway. So at least it keeps us in business for a while,
I'm curious about that comment that Mike just started. It wasn't a question, a comment, but so is it really that, I'll say, easy with air quotes, that you just sort of throw some new basically prompts in instead of some of the previous attack content planted on LLM? Or in other words, was there any changes technically which had to be made to Zap to make this work?
Well, we actually started having a look at LLM chatbots, interacting with the GUI, ye gods, they're painful. They do all sorts of horrific things, switching between protocols and everything. And I'm pretty sure it's to make it hard to automate attacks again, or basically automate the use of them, so you can't actually use someone else's LLM to answer your own questions. So I think that we looked at and it was absolutely horrific. But obviously, a lot of LLMs have APIs as well, and they're much more straightforward. We got a request, we got a response, we can work with that. And as far as we're concerned with attacking LLMs, it's just a different form of attack. So SQL injection and cross-site scripting, they're injection attacks, but how the payloads and how you tell they're different, things have worked, they're very different. So attacking LLMs, prompt injection is still different. It's injection attacks, but we're still, you have a certain set of payloads. You might want to mutate them in certain ways, try and get past various controls, and then you're looking for certain types of output. And that will then depend a lot on what you're actually trying to get out of the LLM, whether you're trying to get the original prompts, or whether you're trying to get the data, training data, or a whole range of things. But it's the same kind of process that we've done before.
Part of that aspect you just mentioned too is just interacting with the chatbot. It's not necessarily designed to accommodate bots, accommodate scanners like you. It's designed for people, even though it's artificial intelligence for human intelligence. But that's crawling it is something. In crawling an app in general is something I think you've struggled with. I think any scanner has struggled with for at least since Zap's inception. What kind of work do you still see for Zap right there before we even talk about additional types of security testing to be doing?
Exactly. Modern web apps are a nightmare to crawl. They really are. They are very, very difficult. The old traditional ones were, based on HTML with minimal JavaScript. They were quite straightforward. They weren't too difficult. Modern web apps, particularly, React can be very challenging. There's so many different ways of actually interacting with these applications, and you need a browser to start with. You can't realistically. You have to have a full JavaScript engine and rendering and things to work out what's going on. So you've got to have these things. Then you've got to interact with the things you can see, and then you've got to this div. Does something happen when I click on it? And you can't get, the handlers, you can't get direct access to the handlers. So you've got to kind of infer that, or it's a nightmare. And it's something, so we've used a third-party open source product called Crawljax, which is fairly effective, but we know it can be better. So this is something we've wanted to work on for ages. We just haven't had enough investment. We haven't had the people. I was working part-time on Zap for years. For the last 4 years I've been working full-time, but on my own. So Ricardo's been working full-time on Zap for 1 year, and now he can carry on. We got Rick joining us, so all of a sudden we've got more people. We can do things we've wanted to do for a long time. So exploring modern web apps is right up there, and one of the things we're going to be looking at.
As part of that, I'm curious, because you mentioned React, and obviously with my AppSec hat on, and the community is always like, use React. It's just a great way to get rid of the class of vulnerabilities of cross-site scripting. For the most part, can address SSRF. You can start to decorate your requests with good things that have positive security properties, but they inhibit Zap, as you say. Have you ever tried to reach out to, or do you think it's possible for these frameworks to make themselves crawlable? More crawlable, inspecting? Does that feel like a future?
I would love to. The trouble is, as I understand it, React is really, really flexible. So it allows people to do all sorts of nasty things. So I think it'll be great if, and some frameworks I think are better than others. So it would be great if frameworks did allow them, made it easier to crawl them for the right reasons, not for for good tools, not bad tools, and how you tell the difference. Obviously, you that's what we got authentication and access control for. We have these things in place.
Fair point.
But it doesn't just come down to exploring as well, because just authenticating, how to authenticate to a modern web app is very hard. So in Zap we've got browser-based authentication. So we launch a browser. We use the browsers for crawling modern web apps, but we can actually intercept these and actually authenticate to start with straight away in the browser. Except we do know that won't work with Google authentication, because Google actually block any browsers controlled by any other tools, which is interesting because as part of the CASA scan that Google require, they recommend that one of the tools uses Zap, which they then block. We need a bit more joined up thinking here, and we need to understand, I think it's, both the people behind the authentication and the frameworks and the developers, that you need to actually make things easier for the tools that are there to help you. So if you make things really difficult for security tools that are there to help you, you'll find it difficult to use these tools. So there has to be some responsibility on the developers and the people behind the frameworks. If you make our lives really difficult, we will not be able to help you as easily.
That's a great theme just right there, is AppSec talking to developers and that relationship. But I also wanted to mention, Simon, I don't know if this helps much, but I don't think you're the first person to complain about product requirements being mutually exclusive and pure utter chaos to deal with. So, but I do wish you good luck. Speaking of the product requirement side, Simon, you're describing Zap still has a lot to reach for to stay with modern web applications, because developers can do really weird, wild things with how they're put together. But in terms of what Zap could be looking for, we talked a little bit just now about LLMs. Ori, what do you see, especially from your customers, saying, oh, if only we could test for this type of vulnerability, this type of situation? Is it still SQL injection cross-site scripting, or have we, long sigh, moved on to something interesting and new finally?
So obviously LLMs is a big one. And just to complete what Simon said on Zap side, the way that we look at LLMs is we believe a year from now, if not already, LLMs are going to be yet another building block of your application, just like open source packages or libraries were 10 or 15 years ago. So you're going to have another block that is LLMs, and as application security vendor or professional, we need to worry about that. So this is one thing. Now, to your question, as we mature and work with our customers on what we call enterprise DAST, there are, I would say, kind of a mix of two things. First, there is still the need for the traditional stuff. Okay, like how can, as Simon said, authentication is always a nightmare. It's a headache for everyone. Can I authenticate and so on? But so it's still there. Accuracy, like Simon mentioned, the modern apps, all the compliance, it's still there. It will probably never go away. But then on the other side, we see more requests on how can I scale that? How can I make it part of my CI, my CD? How can I make it accessible to my developers? So if they develop something, they want to quickly run a quick test, and then move on. So this is kind of a mixer. So no, I don't think SQL injections are going anywhere, but we are going to see some new stuff hopefully soon.
I'll keep my fingers crossed for that, because yes, I'm very curious to see some new stuff so we can have something entertaining to continue to talk about here. Speaking of that scalability aspect, Simon, coming back to you, scaling software and being able to scan not only modern apps, web apps, but modern web apps that have huge attack surfaces, or figuring out, take an Amazon or an online e-commerce, for example, that might have a few 100,000, if not 1 million items in them. You don't need to crawl every single one of those items, right? But you do need to scale this. So and I'm setting this up because we've also, John and I, we talked about memory safety this year, rewriting things into Rust. So in the interest of performance, when is Zap going to be rewritten into Rust so it can be memory safe?
We do have a frequently asked question about this. When are you going to rewrite Zap in my favorite language? Mm-hmm. And the answer is never. We are the Zap core team with Java developers. There are lots of quite a few very good languages you could write a tool like Zap in. If I was going to start a brand new security tool, well, actually, we started, myself and Ricardo started work on one last year for one of the companies we were working for, and we actually used Golang, which is also a very good language. Enjoyed that. But we would, if we tried to rewrite Zap, it would take, 10, 20 years, and it'd be really bad, and nothing. We wouldn't do any improvements whatsoever. We'd go right back to the start and start again. So there is no chance of rewriting Zap. Zap already supports a lot of scripting languages, so you can actually run scripting languages in Zap and essentially reprogram Zap on the fly. So we can do all sorts of crazy things. It wouldn't. When it comes down to it, it wouldn't make the core team that much more productive. In fact, it would make us less productive. So that's the main thing. And that's not to say Rust isn't a very good language. It is. It's not to say Go isn't a very good language, but you have to work out where you are at the moment and what makes the most sense. And for Zap, no chance of rewriting it. Brand new project? Yeah, sure. Then you look again and go, which is the most appropriate language? And I probably wouldn't choose Java.
Well, and I do love that answer, because you highlighted the two aspects of one. We need to deliver, we as Zap need to deliver improvements. That generalizes, I think, to many, many apps. And just the team, what makes the team productive? And, I'm introduced to you as having that 25 years of development experience. That's much more, obviously, than I have. I think that many AppSec folks have too, especially if we think about AppSec as a governance versus an engineering discipline. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about what goes into that language selection, or what goes into making you feel productive as that team working on developing the new capability to crawl modern web apps or to fuzz LLMs doing prompt injections.
The thing is, as the Zap developers, we like technology, we like new stuff, we like playing with things, we like challenges. And luckily, we want hard things. We like hard problems. We wouldn't be working on AppSec if we didn't like hard things. Crawling modern web apps is a nightmare. It really is. And there's a lot of open source tools and closed source tools out there that are doing it. I'm certainly not saying we're going to do it way better than anyone else, but we've got a decent amount of experience. We've got a whole load of cases we know that we don't handle particularly well at the moment. We've got a whole load of ideas. And we're going to have a play and have some fun, So it's actually, when you take a new task on, it's very much, okay, what are we trying to achieve here? And, where do we start? Where do we want to go? Where are we going along the way? And what fun things can we do? Let's enjoy this. Let's have a look at it and have some fun doing what we like doing.
Always one.
Thinking about having fun. I'm still sort of my head stuck in this LLM thing, and how you guys sort of work with it, right? I think it's actually sort of I'm talking, so I think it's sort of interesting. You've talked a few times about how you crawl a modern web app, React, or whatever else. It's sort of interesting to think about how would you crawl How would you crawl an LLM? So that's a little more like, at least to me, what's in my mind right now. It feels like you'd be making a mind map of something, right? Of how do the thoughts sort of connect and what goes on there. Have you got down that path yet, or is that something you guys are thinking about? Or
no, I've not really, I've had very little to do with LLMs. So we're working people with who are working on these things. It would be great to have time, but when it comes down to it, we're not a research team. We don't have that capability. I might know a company who does have quite a good research team, so who we are, starting to do it already. So when it comes down to it, the Zap core team we develop and improve Zap, and we don't have that capability to do the research. So not the fun stuff, the really serious stuff. But yeah, I know people who do now, so we'll be talking to them.
So Ori, I'll pivot that over to you. I don't know, is there something there you can talk about? I'm positive, I'm not familiar off the top of my head, actually I am, with your guys' research team. Is this something that sort of excitedly, Zap's been around, so it's not like a new thing to them, but do they suddenly go, oh my God, they're part of us now, let's dive in and see what we can do with this thing? Or has there been a reaction yet? Or
we are still wrapping our heads around that, on how that synergy, mostly on knowledge, because everything that Simon and the team is bringing to the table, combined with our research team called Checkmarks Zero, brings to the table. They are very good at breaking things and finding horrible things in open source. And which we have a great track record of. We found millions of malicious open source packages, and referring to my previous point, with LLMs kind of taking center stage now, open source LLMs, we believe, is going to be bigger than probably commercial ones like Hugging Face, TensorFlow, all of that. So like if you go right now to Hugging Face, it's really the wild, wild west. Everyone can take a model, train, clone it, do whatever they want, and nothing. And we are already seeing, and the research team has been doing some initial research, and there are new attacks there. So it's definitely something that Checkmarx, the commercial aspect, or Checkmarx, big Checkmarx, as I refer to it when I talk to Simon, is looking on. And once we'll get to productization, we will definitely see how we can involve Simon and the Zap team to give us some more power there.
Yeah, that'd be very cool to see. And one of the aspects, maybe turning into just how do you crawl it, how do you interact, and because I think part of what John's question was also, LLMs have a lot of context that carry on from request to request to request, a little bit like maybe blind SQL injection does require, what am I inferring, something like that, or, here's a cross-site scripting vulnerability that we injected on this input, but it didn't show up until we navigated to some very unrelated type of page. So Simon, coming back to your side, maybe more than just LLMs, you mentioned the challenge of crawling modern web apps. Why not make your life easy and just crawl the APIs instead? Why do you have to interact with the app in the first place?
Well, I mean, APIs are great. They make it much easier to attack, and we've seen quite a few, companies building on top of Zap or creating their own DAS scanners just focusing on APIs. And they do that because it's so much easier. Don't have to worry about the crawling side. So this really does help. The trouble is, real-world apps aren't just APIs. If you just have APIs, then okay, that's all you need to test. If you have web interfaces on top of them, then there can be vulnerabilities there, or there can be vulnerabilities that are based on the ones in the APIs, but they don't get shown in the APIs. You do actually need to have, to actually attack the UIs as well. So that is quite key. Zap, we can import, nearly any API definition. But one of the things I've been trying to work with SaaS tools for ages, because there's so much information you can get if you have access to the source code. DAST is very much, the black box type thing. We don't know what we're attacking. If you actually have access to the source code and maybe a really good SaaS scanner which understands these things and get good information out, there's a whole lot of stuff we can use. Whether it's the API definitions, whether it's understanding the type of what parameters are, what tests are used on parameters, what technologies are being used. If you're not using any SQL servers or anything, well, don't test for them. You can speed scans up like that. So there's loads and loads of things we can do if only we were part of a much wider set of security tools.
Which I'll use that to turn over to Ori as we wrap up here. I'll ask a little bit again, it's a similar question of what do you have in mind for a future from Zap, whether it's the type of testing, a new class of vulnerabilities, or maybe even just what Simon was saying about more integrations.
So I think that we are looking on, first of all, completing the gap, like letting Simon and team, Ricardo and Rick, do what they have been trying to do over the last couple of years and kind of closing the gaps, the accuracy, the rule set, modern apps, authentication, these type of things. Of course, on the commercial aspect, we are looking a lot, and this is part of what Checkmarx is offering, is correlating, because we have an AppSec platform that has all the engines. And again, not a sales pitch, but you asked, so I have to answer. But if we have SAST on one side and we have DAST on the other side, and we can correlate them together, and as Simon was giving here a few examples, it can really contribute and either reduce the noise, reduce false positive, or help developers focus on what matters most. And now we can enjoy both worlds. And I definitely think that there is going to be a lot of LLMs in everyone's life in 2025, 2026, if not already. So this is kind of the three aspects that, to answer your question.
Yeah, fair point. Definitely some LLMs in the future. And Simon, as Ori pointed out, if I ask, you have to answer. So I'm going to ask you one last question. What are you most excited to start writing some code for over the next couple of months?
Yeah, I mean, the modern web app, exploring them. We've had plans for that for ages. We do a lot of investigations and made some starts and not had a chance to follow it through. So yeah, getting stuck into that, it's a hard problem, but yeah, we like hard problems.
You do, and it sounds like you like having fun with those hard problems too.
Oh,
so we wish
yes,
you the
definitely.
best of luck on that. I want to say thank you to Ori, thank you to Simon for joining us this week.
Thank you, Mike and John.
Thank you very much.
Also want to say thank you to John. Thank you to everyone who's been joining us. We're going to take a quick break now and return with news of the week.